Alright, so this is lesson 3. We are graphing with technology and tables on the calculator. The two learning targets here are that I can construct a table of values with or without technology, and I can graph a function with technology. Alright, so we're going to be doing two things here. One, set up a table with technology, and one, we're going to do it without. Alright, so our function here, or for each of these, we're going to construct a table of values. We want at least 5 points in each table. And then we're going to use the table function on our calculator to verify our answer in part A. And then we're going to use the graph function on your calculator to sketch the graph of the equation. Alright, so for 1, alright, my function is y equals x minus 4. Okay, and I have my table here. Alright, for my table, we want to select some points. So what I'm going to do is select x values, or inputs, and then plug them in and find what the outputs are. Okay, so normally I always want to use things like 0, -1, 1. For this, I'm actually going to use -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2. Alright, normally I like to use 0 and 1 and -1 because those are easy to plug in and solve. Alright, so for this one, I'm going to plug in y equals -2 minus 4. I just substituted in my x value for x, and I figure out that y equals -6. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing with -1. Y equals -1 minus 4, and I get -5. So I'm going to plug that in. 0. I'm going to plug 0 in. Y equals 0 minus 4, and I get -4. Plug in y equals 1 minus 4, and I get -3. 2, I'm going to plug in y equals 2 minus 4, and that gives me -2. Okay, so now I have a table of values, and now I'm going to graph it. So -2, -6, -1, 2, you go left or right, and then up or down. So -2, -6 is going to be right there. -1, -5 is right here. 0, -4, 1, -3, and 2, -2. Okay, perfect. Alright, I'm going to use some kind of straight edge. You guys all have your IDs. I'm going to use my driver's license here, since that is a straight line, and we're going to draw a nice line and cover the entire graph, give it arrows. Alright, and now I want to check it. So in order to check it, I'm going to take out my calculator. We all need our graphing calculators. Alright, and to plug it in, I go to y equals. Okay, I'm going to clear out anything that's in there. I'm going to make sure none of these these plots are highlighted. If they are, it's like that. I'm going to click on it, we hit enter, and it gets rid of it. Okay, mine are all good, so I'm going to go ahead and plug it in. X, let me put it in the screen a little more for you, x minus 4. Okay, there's my function, I put it in. Now to get the table, I hit the second button, and then my graph key. See, table's up there in blue, and it gives you the graph. Okay, I obviously have a problem here. I need to change this. Table starts 0, 1, depending on auto. Let's see if that works. Okay, you guys shouldn't have that problem. You guys should be right here. Alright, so now I'm going to find these x values. I use -2, 1, 0, 1, and 2. So I want to just double check that those are what I have. I have 2, -6, -2, -6, -1, 5, 0, -4. So I did it right, so I'm all good. Okay, now I just want to double check my graph. So I'm going to move this to the other side so we see our graph. To actually graph it, I just go ahead and hit the graph key. Alright, does that look the same? Yes, it does. Sometimes you guys might have a weird window, meaning you can't really see the graph. If you can't see it, we're going to hit zoom, and the number 6, that's standard right there. So I can arrow down to 6, or I can just hit the button 6. And that always gives me a 10 by 10 window. So that's 10 by 10. Alright, just like we have on our actual graph. Okay, alright, let's go to number 2. So So number 2, again, I'm going to do by hand first. Alright, I'm going to plug in easy numbers. I'm going to do -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2. Okay, -2 squared. Alright, I'm just plugging in my x values for the x in the function. -2 squared is 4. -1 squared is 1. 0 squared is 0. 1 squared is 1. And 2 squared is 4. Alright, so now I just substituted those in. I plugged in my inputs and I got my output. Okay, just like we did yesterday in class. Okay, now let's go ahead and graph it. -2 up 4. -1 up 1. 0 and 0. 1 and 1. And 2 and 4. Okay, now after I plot the points, let's say maybe I don't really know how to connect the lines. That's where my calculator really comes in handy. So I'm going to check my work and do this before I draw my graph. So I'm going to go to y equals. I'm going to clear out what I had. And I'm going to enter in this function, x squared. Okay, now I'm going to go to second table. And I can check these values. -2 and 4. -1 and 1. 0 and 0. 1 and 1. 2 and 4. Great. Now what does my graph look like? Let's hit graph. Okay, look at that, there's a parabola. Alright, so now I know how to draw it. So these aren't actually straight lines, and we'll see more examples of this. These are actually curved. Okay, they curve a little bit right here, and then they curve up. Okay, so I checked it, I'm all good. Alright, let's go to the next example. Let's go to 3. Okay, here's a refresher. So we have y equals the absolute value of x. Alright, remember these lines on the outside means absolute value. So I'm going to use the same numbers, -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2. Now you can use any numbers for the x values, it doesn't matter. I usually like to pick these just because they're easy to plug in. So what is the y equals the absolute value of -2? Remember, absolute value means the number away it is from 0 on the number line, which means whatever's in there just becomes positive. So the absolute value of -2 is 2. The absolute value of -1 is 1. The absolute value of 0 is 0. Well, absolute value of 1, alright, now this is the same thing. If it's positive, the answer is positive. If it's negative, it's positive also. So the absolute value of 1 is 1. The absolute value of 2 is 2. Okay, now I can check this on my calculator before I graph it. I'm going to go to y equals. Now the absolute value, okay, I just hit a double check, is going to be in math. So we hit the math key. Now up at the top it says math, number, CPX. I'm going to move it over to number. And the absolute value is there. So I'm going to hit that. Alright, and it gives me my absolute value. But I need to put it into y equals. So I'm going to go to y equals. And I'm going to hit math. Move it over. Click the absolute value. That's number 1. And it gives me that. Okay, so I want the absolute value of x. That's my function. Okay, so now I want to see my table. I want to double check. -2, 2. -1, 1. 0, 0. 1, 1. 2, 2. Okay, great. Now let's see what this graph looks like. So I hit the graph button, and that's my V graph. Remember we saw those yesterday when we were doing domain and range? Absolute value graphs are my V graphs. So let's plot these points. -2, 2. -1, 1. 0, 0. 1, 1. 2, 2. Okay, and I know these keep going. I know these keep going. That's why I use my graph to know whether it stops or it keeps going. So let's go ahead and draw my nice lines here. Again, you guys should use your IDs for this, so you guys have nice straight lines, so we know on quizzes and tests that you graphed it correctly. Okay, great. All right, the next few. The number 4 is going to be a U try, so you guys can go ahead and try that. I want to do one more together before we send this off for you guys. 5 together. Alright, one more together. Now this one I'm going to do strictly on my calculator. Alright, I know I'm going to use my same numbers, -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2, but I'm not going to plug all that stuff in. Let's just do it straight off our calculator. So I'm going to go to y equals, and I'm going to enter this function. So remember to enter a fraction. I use alpha y equals, why didn't that work? Y equals, alright, alpha y equals, and I get my fraction. Alright, and I'm going to do 1/2, arrow out because it's not in there, and then I need an absolute value of x. So I'm going to hit math, move over to number, select the first option, that's absolute value, and of x. Okay, and I'm going to arrow out. So there it is, there's my function just like I have it here. And now let's go to my table, second table. Okay, and I see the absolute value of -2 is 1. The absolute value of -1 is 1/2. The absolute value of 0 is 0. If I plug in 1, I get 1/2. If I plug in 2, I get 1. Alright, sometimes you guys might want to scroll through this, and after you see that, I pick these numbers right away. If I had a pencil, I would probably erase it and select like -4/2 because they're nice numbers and not fractions, but that's up to you. Our graph is still going to be the same. Alright, so let's go ahead and let's graph these now. So -2 and 1, -2 and 1, -1 and 1/2, 0 and 0, 1 and 1/2, and 2 and 1. Okay, if I picked different numbers, I would have just had some different points here, but I would have the same graph. I'm going to go ahead and use my ID and draw a real nice straight line. Okay, there we go. Alright, and then I can see my graph. If I want to double check that, I'm going to go back to my graph. Alright. Now the next lesson we'll talk about later is we have this. Obviously, look, it looks the same as the last one, but what happened? This one got a little bit wider, and we'll talk about that next. You don't have to worry about that right now. Alright, so go ahead. The rest of them are going to be U-tries, so number 4, 6, 7, 8 are going to be our U-try numbers. Alright, so go ahead and finish those up, and we will see you guys tomorrow. Do me a favor, I actually didn't throw this on there. On the back here, alright, I want you guys to write what you understand. Alright, what you need help with. Alright, and how will you get that help? Okay, just like you guys have been on the other notes, I guess I just forgot to put it on the last page here. So make sure you guys have this at the end. That's how we can check and see that you have your notes done. Alright, we'll see you guys tomorrow.